What's up, Jets fans? Welcome to the latest edition of Jets Latest, where you get the latest on the Jets, Jets. I'm your host, the spitting statistician, Dane Martinez, and today I want to talk about a few things, definitely some of the things we saw from the preseason finale against the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. But first, we have to start with a couple of what I think are shrewd roster moves that Dane Martinez made last week, really addressing the defensive line position. Now, that was a position all the way back to the draft when we were talking about how we were going to upgrade. We thought that stopping the run was a problem, especially next to Pro Bowl caliber, all pro caliber Quinnen Williams, right? We talked about maybe guys in the draft. We talked about what we attack it in free agency. And remember, we did in free agency sign guys like Byron Cowart, like Derek Nottie, like J2 Fele, who flashed in that first game against Green Bay as well. But one of the things I always said was that there would be opportunities throughout the summer, towards the end of training camp, to go ahead and find guys to fill out the depth chart. And we are now officially in that time of season. This roster churn is going to happen with cutdowns happening tomorrow across the NFL. And to get ahead of that in what I thought was a very smart way, Dane Martinez made a couple of trades. First of all, the Jets traded 2 6th-round picks to the Minnesota Vikings for Harrison Phillips and, a low-level 7th-round pick. Here's the other part about this. The Vikings are going to pay half of Phillips' $7.4 million salary for 2025. Phillips, 6'3", 307 pounds, 29 years old. Here's one of the keys. Has not missed a game in the last 3 seasons. A PFF grade kind of slightly above average, 88th out of 220, but because he was on the field all the time, his 25 assisted tackles led the league. His 29 solo tackles in the top 30. His 21 stops inside the top 40. And interestingly enough, like we've seen with some other players, playing with the Minnesota Vikings, he played against Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrand when the Detroit Lions twice a year. He averaged 3 tackles for loss a game against the Detroit Lions over the past couple of years. So Engstrand, Glenn saw this guy, and to be honest, Phillips was a key reason why the Minnesota Vikings were actually second best in the NFL against the run last year. You see, they only allowed less than 1,600 yards. So that is an interesting move. Harrison Phillips was not able to obviously play in the game against the Eagles, but I believe he might be the new defensive line interior D lineman starter next to Quinnen Williams. But the Jets weren't done. They made another move earlier last week, and they traded with the Cleveland Browns. Another 6th-round pick to the Browns to go ahead and get interior defensive lineman Juwan Briggs. Now, with Briggs, here's the interesting part. Briggs was a rookie last year. Same kind of thing. Flashed at times. His PFF grade was actually, check this out, in the top 25 among interior defensive linemen, 23rd with a grade of 72.2, okay? He hasn't played as much, didn't play as many snaps, so what you have is a guy who can still flash, a guy with upside, a guy with talent, and you went out and got Harrison Phillips, a guy that is more of a veteran and has literally come to post and been up every game over the last 3 years. One of the things to note about Briggs is that he played at Cincinnati in college, where for a year he was a teammate with Sauce Gardner. So the familiarity is still definitely there. Again, this is an example. I think the Jets are smart. They spent some 6th-round picks. These are guys that maybe, if they were on the trade block, Minnesota with Phillips, Cleveland with Briggs, maybe they were going to wind up cutting. Maybe they didn't have a place because, listen, Minnesota has a ton of D linemen. They were second best against the run. The Cleveland Browns, you know about their defense, their defensive line anchored by guys like Myles Garrett, right? So the Jets go ahead and put in a low-level pick to not have to compete with other teams for these guys when it comes to waivers. And I think this is a smart move before cut downs happen. And to be quite honest, we thought we were going to sign Derek Nottie, or we did last in the offseason from the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought he was going to be the run stopper. He really hasn't performed. He has not flashed. He has not been it. Byron Cowart, the guy that we signed from the Chicago Bears, he is injured. He had an ankle injury, hasn't really played since. So they needed to address this position, and they did so. And let me tell you something. When you trade for a guy like Briggs, when you trade for a guy like Phillips this late in camp, they are not cutting them, okay? They just spent assets. They believe these guys are going to make the 53-man roster. So now I believe this defensive line is obviously going to be Quinnen Williams. I think you're going to have Phillips. I think you're going to have Briggs. I think you're going to have J2 Fele. And I think you're going to have Leonard Taylor. Those are 5. And then Byron Cowart, It's going to be kind of, I think, maybe on the injured list, something like that. Unfortunately, that means, in my opinion, there is no spot for Derek Nottie, who we signed in the offseason and free agency from the Kansas City Chiefs. But really, honestly, a shrewd move. They finally addressed that defensive line. They kept on trying to do it in free agency, and now they found two guys who I think in this league. For Briggs, flashed as a rookie. For Phillips, has been a consistent, reliable veteran and part of a very good run defense last year in the Minnesota Vikings. All right, so now moving on, let's talk about that game against the Philadelphia Eagles, right? There weren't a lot of starters, but here's the problem, and here's the one thing we really have to keep an eye on. Aaron Glenn has been all over it, right? We've heard in camp the idea of the penalties, the silly mistakes, the undisciplined plays. The Jets have been an undisciplined team over the last couple of years, and quite frankly, that continued in this game against the Eagles. They committed 10 penalties for 78 yards. And part of what I saw is it happened early, holding penalties on first down, even one on Armand Membu, by the way. That puts you behind the sticks. And part of the reason, then you're in third and longs. When we're going to be a run, efficient, play action kind of team, we can't be in third and 13 behind the chains like that. And it showed. The Jets converted only 3 of 12 third downs, okay? And they even put up a graphic during the telecast. The Jets were really at the bottom of the league. Most penalties a game last year. Most penalty yards per game last year. 39 drop passes, another kind of mistake. Most in the league. 29.2 missed tackles as their percentage on defense. That is the highest rate of missed tackles in the league. These are the kind of careless, sloppy things that Aaron Glenn has talked about cleaning up. When you want to be a run, physical, defense, time of possession kind of game, you can't have penalties putting you behind the chains. You can't drop passes if you're going to need to be efficient. That's why we focused on guys like Josh Reynolds, Mason Taylor, who don't have a lot of drops, right? And of course, that's why we're tackling in preseason and in camp, right? Aaron Glenn said, we need to get better at these penalties. We need to get better at tackling. And here's the other thing, right? Not only do we have to clean it up, but it was hard for me to get a read on Brady Cook in this game, because he was in third and longs a lot in bad situations. He went 13 of 19 for 99 yards through a pick. Dane Martinez had some of the same issues behind the chains. He went 7 of 14, 86 yards, and threw a pick. So really, this is something, and it harkened back to what I remember from last year and years past, right? Like all of a sudden, we think we're moving the ball, boom, penalty on first down. All of a sudden, we think we get off the field, boom, penalty preventing a big play or preventing our defense getting off the field. This is something Aaron Glenn has focused on, but unfortunately, it has not really come to pass. We have still seen this in the preseason. I will say this, the good thing, Membu had a holding penalty. They said, though, that was the first penalty on the starting offensive line all preseason. So maybe when the starters get in, that message can come to bear, because the kind of style we're going to play, the kind of team we're going to be, cannot be sloppy and undisciplined. You've heard Aaron Glenn say it a ton. Undisciplined teams do not win games in this league. But let's get to the positives, right? So hopefully we clean that up. That's something we got to clean up. But there was a lot of young talent that I did think flashed in our final preseason game. It was an opportunity for some of these guys to get a little bit more playing time. Here are some of the things I noticed. Listen, Brandon Smith continues to look like he can be a wide receiver in this league. 3 catches for 42 yards on 4 targets. I think he has a roster spot, whether it's Xavier Gibson that's going to get cut, Malachi Corley that's going to get cut, I don't know, but B. Smitty is going to have a roster spot. I thought Arian Smith, wasn't involved in a passing game, but I don't know if you saw this. He had an end around. He went in motion. They gave it to him on a kind of like a jet sweep end around. He got the edge, got the corner, and he had a 10-yard gain on an end around. I think that's important. I think that's part of the way we're going to use Arian Smith. We talk about the downfield threat deep, vertically stretching the field. But with a downhill power run game, having the ability to have a guy like Arian Smith run horizontally and stretch the defense that way in the run game, I think is an interesting added element that we saw for the first time against the Eagles. Malachi Moore, our draft pick out of Alabama, had a nice little game. 3 tackles, broke up a pass, and had an interception, and he showed pretty good ball skills on that interception. An over-the-shoulder catch, turning the other way. Malachi Moore, our safety pick out of Alabama. I thought he had a nice game. And then listen, we got some interesting decisions at the back of the running back room, right? We know there's going to be obviously Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis. Then there's also Keenan Nwanu, who is a kickoff return stud, and Donovan Edwards, who we have seen been utilized in a lot of different ways. Nwanu ran 6 times for 29 yards. Edwards, 9 times for 26 yards. He also had 2 catches out of the backfield and was involved in the kickoff game. I think it's interesting. There might be a way to keep Kenny and Donovan Edwards on this roster, and I think both of them kind of made a case to make the 53-man roster. So I think that one is going to be interesting when we make cut downs on Tuesday tomorrow, if Edwards makes this team. I really hope Edwards can make this team because also he's a speed running back. Unlike what I'm saying, this physical downhill north-south kind of style that Aaron Glenn talks about with his 3 top backs, right? With Breece Hall, with Braylon Allen, with Isaiah Davis. They're north-south guy, powerful guys. So to have Donovan Edwards as a kind of change of pace speed guy, to have the ability with Arian Smith to get around the edge, I think that's interesting. And Keeney is one of the best return guys in the NFL, okay? I've told you about this. His kickoff return average for his career is 4th best in NFL history. He had that 99-yard touchdown kickoff return against Seattle last year before he got hurt. Remember, he has been AFC Special Teams Player of the Week. So I want to find a way if Nwanu and Edwards can make this roster, and they both made an interesting case in order to do so. So that'll do it for this episode of Jets Latest. I think these defensive line upgrades are important, and these are some of these young guys we got to watch to see if they get roster spots here this week, as it is cut down day around the NFL. We had some roster churn, getting guys like Phillips and, Briggs. We're going to see there's going to be some cuts. We're going to be talking about it here on Jets Latest, to be sure. But listen to what you guys are saying, and thank you so much for the growth of this channel. Remember, you can become a Jets Latest insider if you click on that link in the description. I'm talking about exclusive extra content. I'm talking about all sorts of other perks and insights as we get into the regular season. But I love engaging with you guys, and thank you for the comments. Like, for example, Jack McGuire, 9836 says, latest pickups on the D-line are a good sign of adapting to changing conditions. If the wide receiver room gets some help, we could surprise some teams around the league. I really like it. I thought it was great moves by Muji, spending low round picks to get ahead of the game and identify D linemen, because some of the free agent signings, specifically Nadi, in my opinion, has not worked out. As for the wide receiver room, I think it's going to be Garrett Wilson. I think it's going to be Josh Reynolds. I think it's going to be Tyler Johnson. I think it's going to be Arian Smith. I think it's going to be Alan Lazard. And then I think it's going to be B. Smitty and maybe Skinner as well. And that kind of leaves out guys like Xavier Gibson and Malachi Corley. And the way Brandon Smith has been flashing, the way Arian Smith has been flashing, along with an Alan Lazard, Tyler Johnson, Josh Reynolds, I actually think the Jets are ready to go to war with those guys. I don't think they're going to make any more moves unless something wild pops off. The Jet Fighter 666 says, I think we've seen Martinez, meaning Adrian Martinez, ceiling. Good game management, moves the ball. Cook has something, though, you can't teach, he says. I think both will be here for a while. If it was me, Cook would be my pick. I see him taking over everyone. And this is going to be another interesting one, right? Who wins the job as QB3? And then can the other one kind of hide from the rest of the league during waivers and be on our practice squad? That's another interesting cut down this week that we are going to have to see. Do Martinez and Cook somehow remain on this roster? Remember, Tyrod Taylor, maybe that's part of why Tyrod Taylor has that injury, might be on the PUP list to make room for these guys. It's going to be interesting to see if they how they carry these quarterbacks, right? Also out there, Old Dave, shout out regular Old Dave 1000 says, adding a veteran starting defensive tackle and a big upside development defensive tackle are signs that this staff has awareness and a plan. I completely agree, Old Dave. First of all, shout out to your awareness there. Like, they get a vet, a guy that's been here for 3 years in a row, a guy who's contributed to a good run-stopping defense in Minnesota with Harrison Phillips, and then an upside guy. And listen, Juwan Briggs really fits the bill of guys we were trying to get in free agency, right? Guys that are young, guys that have flashed in this league. I think he was a 3rd-round pick, right? So, that same kind of thing with the upside for sure. He says, guys brought in weren't cutting it, and they adjusted. I agree. Can you imagine what 5 years of this structure will look like? Go Jets. And I agree with that as well. It's a process. I have talked about this, right? And that's why we got brought in a lot of youth. We have a lot of short contracts. We got salary cap. Moving forward, we're going to teach these guys, develop these guys, coach these guys up, see who sticks, and keep moving forward. And that's how we continue to build this roster. So thank you, Old Dave 1000, for being a regular and for that comment. I completely agree. And then there's Kevin Ricks 4773 who says, agree with you on the wide receiver room. Arian Smith, Brandon Smith, and Skinner complement the vets. That's exactly how I think it's going to go. Arian Smith, Brandon Skinner, and then these vets, Lazard, Tyler Johnson, Josh Reynolds, and then, of course, the alpha, Garrett Wilson. I think that's exactly how it's going to go. Have the tried and true, and then upside with the youngsters, the same way we're doing it with the defensive linemen. So thanks to everybody for the comments. As always, remember, like these videos, subscribe to the Jets Latest channel, and thank you so much for people who did. Remember, you could become an insider. Click on that button and tell a Jets fan friend to tell a Jets fan friend. We are going to be chronicling all the cut downs, all the roster churn this week in the NFL. It is a very interesting week, especially for big-time Jets fans, as we fill out this roster and form our 53 men who are going to be part of the green and white in 2025. And if you want to be down with me, Spittin' Statistician Dane Martinez, remember, follow me on Twitter at Spittin' Speeds, become a Jets Latest insider, and I am the host of the FTN Fantasy Show over on SiriusXM Channel 87. It is fantasy football season. I've been participating in a ton of expert industry drafts. That's how I came to this work, and you could always hit me up as well asking questions about that. We'll do that for some of the insiders as well. But if you're locked into the green and white, the JETS, Jets, keep it right here. Jets Latest every day, as we are inside of 2 weeks away from week 1 against Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll be talking about all the time right here on Jets Latest. Tell a Jets fan friend to tell a Jets fan friend. But for now, we out of here. Peace.